In this lesson, we are going to learn about how South Carolina and the United States eventually realized that the first government, the Articles of Confederation, needed to be scrapped and rewritten. Now, not all states held the position that the Articles of Confederation should be totally rewritten and a new government formed, but South Carolina was one of the states that definitely held that opinion. As has been said before, the first government of the United States was the Articles of Confederation. And this first government really exhibited the fears the colonists had about the tyranny that government could have on people's rights. And in this government, they really feared centralized power like that of a king. So all of the power lied with the states. The national government, or a national government can sometimes be referred to as the federal government, it had no power. And one of the main things it had no power to do, which really limited the effectiveness of this government, was it had no power to tax. So the national government, the federal government, had no money. And with no money, because under the Articles of Confederation, the states had to voluntarily donate the money, there was also no national army. So both of these things are proof of the founding fathers and the former English colonists' fear of too strong of a government. One of the weak things about this government was that all of the states had to agree upon certain issues. There had to be a unanimous vote. Every state had to agree, which made any policy next to impossible. In addition to the weakness of the government, the new United States was not in a positive economic state at the end of the war. The new United States was in a depression, and the states and the national government were in serious debt. Some of the reasons that the new United States was in debt was because they owed money to the soldiers who served in the war. They owed money to the people whose goods had been commandeered, and some people, the taxpayers who would pay the tax, they owed money to the British because of the Treaty of Paris, which said that the former colonists would still honor the debts that they had to creditors in England. So, we have all this problems. The general state of the United States economy was depression and indebtedness. Many of the people from South Carolina, of the people from the United States, realized that we need a stronger national government or federal government. And the question is, do we fix the Articles of Confederation, or do we go totally new? Now, the thing that would bring about change to the Articles of Confederation was this backcountry rebellion that was in Massachusetts, where a man named Daniel Shea led a group of followers who were upset at economic and social injustices in Massachusetts called Shays' Rebellion. Shays' Rebellion amounted to 4,000 backcountry Massachusetts farmers and woodsmen versus the coastal elite who, just like in South Carolina, the coastal elite was controlling the government and limiting the participation of the backcountry farmers and woodsmen. And the backcountry got so tired of this injustice, this almost second-class citizenship, that this man named Daniel Shea led a rebellion and sought to use violence to fix this. Eventually it ended, but the national government had no power to handle it because of the limitations that were set up by the Articles of Confederation. So Shea's rebellion would cause the Articles of Confederation to change. And as was said before, should it just be ratified or fixed? You know, ratified is changed. Or should it be scrapped and we go totally new? Well, South Carolina, as well as some other states, felt that we should just start over and write a totally new document. And this movement for a new document was led by the South Carolinian Charles Pinckney. And one of the things that South Carolina, one of the positions of South Carolina in the new government is they supported a strong national government. And rather than ratify or fix the new the Articles of Confederation, they wanted a new constitution. So, before I get into some of the specifics of this new Constitution and more about South Carolina's position as to what they would desire in it, we will review the economic situation of the United States after the war. South Carolina shared this position in that we were in debt and in a depression, which was similar to the United States government under the Articles of Confederation. The political tensions would lead to a change to the Articles of Confederation. After Shea's rebellion, a stronger national government was desired. Shea's rebellion causes the Articles of Confederation to change. This was between the coastal elite and the backcountry folk in Massachusetts. This causes a need for a stronger central government. I'm going to use this U.S. history play to teach this section, and the title of this play was A New Beginning. So America had one beginning, the United States had one beginning, and they tried to govern themselves with the Articles of Confederation. Well, in this play, we will learn about the positions of the Founding Fathers and if they could find a way to govern themselves, which would become our Constitution. Now, in this play, which is historically accurate, Congress called a federal convention in May of 1787 to revise the Articles of Confederation. But instead of revising the Articles of Confederation, they took South Carolina's position, which was to just write a totally new Constitution. Once again, South Carolina, as well as others, wanted an entirely new Constitution. And the reason is, the winter before, a violent uprising called Shays' Rebellion had taken place in Massachusetts. And many Americans were asking, is the nation headed for anarchy? And could the U.S. survive under the Articles of Confederation? It was realized by the Founding Fathers that we need a new government. The Articles of Confederation, the states act like independent nations, Congress cannot levy taxes, and the states squabble with each other. Shays' Rebellion showed our government how weak the U.S. government was. Now we're fighting one another. South Carolina's position as to what they would like in the new government was as follows. Once again, this was led by the Low Country planter Charles Pinckney, who would become very influential in the 1787 Constitutional Convention. And South Carolina wanted a strong national government with a new constitution, so getting rid of the Articles of Confederation. They also wanted a three-branch government, which you should have learned in the past is called separation of powers. Separation of powers is the government is created of three branches. You have the branch that makes the laws, that's called the legislative. The branch that enforces the laws, called the executive, which is what the president is part of, and a judiciary branch that interprets the laws. This doesn't give any one branch the power to control the government, because in order for any laws to become valid, they have to first be passed by the legislative, in most cases signed off by the executive, and later reviewed and checked for their constitutionality by the judiciary. South Carolina supported the creation of an executive branch, but they wanted the president to serve a longer term, a 6 to 7 year term, instead of how long is the term of the president that the presidential term limits we have currently that was established in the Constitution. Yes, it was 4. 2 4-year terms is the maximum. South Carolina also, which would show their desire to have power remain in the hands of the elite, they wanted only property holders to be able to, or property owners, to be able to hold office. Once it was decided, the federal government said that the states will determine qualifications for holding office. Now this brings us to the debates about the Constitution that would be formed and the possible plans and compromises that would have to be made. Now, the 1787 Constitutional Convention, which would become what we have today, there were two plans, and one of the plans was the New Jersey Plan. Now, the New Jersey Plan sought to amend the Articles of Confederation, not get rid of the Articles of Confederation. In the New Jersey Plan, just as in the Articles of Confederation, the legislature remained unicameral, one house. And in the New Jersey Plan, each state would have equal representation. Some states, especially the smaller states, liked the New Jersey plan because regardless of your population, each state had an equal voice in the government. South Carolina, though, liked what was known as the Virginia plan. The Virginia plan was to rewrite a new constitution. And the new constitution, at its foundation, would have for the legislature a bicameral legislature, one with a house and an upper house and a lower house. Most important would be that the lower house would be based on population. So those states with more population would have more power in the government. So it's population-based representation. Those states with more population would have more power. South Carolina was a populous state, especially if you include the South Carolina slaves. South Carolina liked the Virginia plan. So, to return to the play, the New Jersey plan would revise the Articles of Confederation, not do away with them. In the New Jersey plan, each state would have an equal vote in Congress, just as it does now. However, in the Virginia plan, things would be different and a new government would be written. In the Virginia plan, a national government with 3 branches was proposed, and Congress would have 2 houses with seats based on state population, which in the Virginia plan would give those states with a greater population more power. So, after much debating where small states wanted the New Jersey plan and large states wanted the Virginia plan, in the end there was compromise which had parts of both plans. And this compromise was called the Great Compromise. The Great Compromise created a bicameral government, as was desired in the Virginia plan. This bicameral government, though, would not be entirely based on state population. You would have a lower house that was based on state population. This today is known as the House of Representatives. But then you would have an upper house, which was based on equality of states, called the Senate. So this Great Compromise would settle the first hurdle of the new Constitution, which it was decided to write a new Constitution. Charles Pinckney was on that side of the new Constitution all along, and South Carolina liked that. And in the Great Compromise, as the Virginia plan called for, the U.S. created a bicameral legislature, except instead of both houses being population-based, only one, the lower house, was based on population, and the upper house was based on equality, where each state has 2 senators. Now, the beauty of the bicameral legislature is that there had to be agreement between the states. In order for a bill to become a law, and therefore change policy, both the upper house and the lower house have to vote in favor of this. So both the large states and the small states have to be somewhat in agreement with a 50%, 51% majority. That's just the beginning of how bills become laws, and we will learn more about those in further lessons. So, in review, South Carolina's position at the Constitutional Convention would be the following. They liked a strong national government with a new constitution. They also liked the formation of a 3-branch government known as separation of powers, and for the president to have a 6 to 7 year term instead of the 4-year term that we have. They also liked the Virginia Plan. In the end, both the Virginia Plan and parts of the New Jersey Plan were put to work to create the bicameral legislature that we have today. The creation of this bicameral legislature was achieved by the first of the compromises, which was known as the Great Compromise, where a bicameral government was created with 2 houses, one that would be based on population, as the Virginia Plan wanted, and one that would be equal representation, as the New Jersey Plan wanted. This completes the lesson for today. In the next lesson, we will learn about further compromises that had to be settled for states to ratify the Constitution, which would ultimately make them part of the United States and official members of the United States. Until then, thank you for listening. I hope you did well.